A significant part of beta was ensuring that the game ran as smoothly as it does now. So when I did package the version you see now, I didn't fully realize the performance we were actually running at until several packages later, wherein which performance is going from a nice 90 frames per second, potentially more, and progressively dipping down to the extent of getting to 3 frames per second, which not ideal. Um, so today I'm going to show you how I achieved the performance we got with this and how I used Unreal Insights to understand what the actual issue with the game was and my somewhat useful way of avoiding this. So as you can see, the frames per second up here in the top right, as this is a UI, we're running somewhere between 300 to 400 frames per second, which doesn't surprise me at all. And as you can see, we're running, it drops substantially. We started at around 120 and we've immediately dipped down to the 30 to 40 range. And I think as you move around this, you can really see the sort of the impact that the issues with this level is that we're having. So this version is from around February March period of 2025, which in comparison to what we have now and what I will show, um, is quite barren. It's quite empty. There's not a great deal going on, which obviously begs the question of, well, what on earth is causing us to dip from 120 straight down to 30 or 40? As we transition to this level, we immediately come back up to the 200 range. The significance obviously being that this level is just as empty, even more empty than what was just shown there. There are no particles in this level. You will notice along the ground you can see the wind blowing particles, as well as in the distance, especially along the walls, the dust particle that we created for the game. These are, at this stage, a significant impact on performance. Niagara system comes with the two options to render particles for the CPU and the GPU. I can guarantee that these particles are running on the CPU, which is the reason we are running at 40 frames per second. Having this on CPU is not ideal. And although we did fix this issue, it still wasn't one of the main factors. So now we're moving on to a build that was created on the 20th of May, a good many months from the first version. Um, Obviously, we're running here. This is also UI, but now has several moving parts. It has half the frame rate, but 200 frames is still pretty good. But we're going to look at how the game runs now in comparison to how it started within that first packaged version. As you can see, we're running at about 90 to 100, dipping a little bit into the 80s, which is completely fine. But to compare the scale that the first version to the most recent version has is incredible. You know, we've got so much more. We've got moving AI, we've got all these other particle effects, the same particles, moving ships, animated models. So it really does, beg the question as what else was impacting performance. The night phase runs at a very steady 80 to 90 frame per second, which is just as good. Obviously not as high as what it was in the first version, but the first version, like I say, was completely empty in comparison to what's now in here. So moving over now to the actual Unreal Editor itself, This is the most recent editor save of the game. I just want to show how we overcame this issue and how we figured out this issue. The first thing I looked at was textures. Most things in here are all different textures. There's nothing that uses the same texture as other things. For myself, I knew this was a potential issue, especially when we started this project when I was running on a different computer that did not that essentially ran the game at like 10 frames per second on a high quality, bring it down to lower, made it about 30, which isn't ideal, but had to manage what I got, which, I mean, we still managed pretty well for the 3 months that I did use it for. But I knew that textures could sometimes be a significant hit on performance, especially when we did Pirate Wizard and Composting Game. A lot of their original textures are all at the 4K resolution, which obviously has lots of detail, but with the scale of this game, it doesn't, not everything warrants having a 4K texture. So I was very lenient with mine, focusing on keeping them around 1K at the most and dipping them down if necessary. So the likes of these tools, or even these gears here, their textures, the textures on this were imported at 512 by 512, and I've further halved them again to be 256, which this probably isn't as significant. 512 originally is a good amount because it's not it's an item that the player will come across, pick up, and then the act is destroyed. It doesn't need to be there as persistent, so that it needs to look good. Whereas the likes of the trees, for example, these will have higher textures than that because these are always in the level. So the way that I went about ensuring that the textures were to an agreeable standard, especially working with other people who may not be following things as strictly, I used the filter feature, and so you can all the textures for the game are in our meshes. So I could go here, and I can simply just go to textures and tick this box, and it shows every single texture. Now we've got a lot of textures here, but I could simply just go from here to here, right click, asset, and then edit selection property matrix, and it opens up all of these together, and then I can look at the maximum texture size and pin it on here, and I can then edit the textures as I see fit. So as you can see, some of these haven't been changed because there's been stuff added afterwards. But for the screen, I edited it from the original to be half, and the likes of other less essential ones like the emission and the normals, I've halved even further because they don't need to be as high detailed as the base color. So once I did change every single texture to follow a more consistent number, tested it again, and we were still getting hit by a severe performance drop. So I could change textures back and see how that impacts performance, but some of these textures you can't really tell that there's a difference in quality. Sometimes you sort of can, like you can see it just a bit here on the edges and even the design of the doors here, but it's not something super essential. It's not something you'd not sort of notice unless you're really up close to it. I did a bit of digging. Some results were suggesting that perhaps it was casting. For me, with the things that I've been programming myself up here, what I'm doing is I'm casting to something that we need, and I'm setting it as a variable. And because I'm setting it as a variable, we don't need to cast again, and I've got an entire access to everything you'd get from this specific component. I knew this wasn't a significant issue. Casting can be avoided entirely, but for just once in a couple of things, not that crazy. So it brings us back around again to what could possibly be the issue. So during my research into this, I was exposed to a very helpful tool inside of Unreal Engine that can help measure the performance of a game. So at the bottom of the screen is the trace, which if you open up, you have access to Unreal Insights. And this is essentially a trace of the times you play the game, and it runs throughout that session and measures the frames and everything that's going down and breaks it down for you to understand. The way that these are being captured is in the, I believe, the advanced settings. In the advanced settings, the additional launch parameters, I have this, which then causes the trace to start, which can be used through the standalone game option here. And so to show, for example, we'll go with a more higher run one is one that I spent a lot of time experimenting in and can easily show examples of what I'm looking for. So big red lines is when performance did get affected. It got quite low. The lower down levels here, the lower the bars, the better the performance. The reds here is obviously it's starting up, and then a lot of this will be, I'd imagine here is probably the main menu where this red spike is then us moving into the day phase. And then this period here is me playing through that. As you can see, there are a couple of spikes around, which is totally fine. Look, games always have little spikes and stuff. But as you get further along, there are a couple more spikes, but you can clearly see there is this gradual incline in performance to the point where we've gone from 80 frames down to 50, and as we go along, all the way down to 40, which then I believe around this point we've moved into the night phase, which from when this would be taken from is not as populated as this version over here, probably to the same standard still as the first version. With Unreal Insights though, you can really get in depth to it. So if we just click on this bit here, we're then brought to it right here. It's highlighted for us perfectly. And if we come and have a look at this frame, 6.4 milliseconds. That's not a bad. That's not a bad time at all. As you can see, 4.6, 4.8, 5. It seems that 4 to 6 is about the average millisecond length for a frame, which is great. But then if we hop all the way to, say, this frame, look at the frame, it's now 25 milliseconds. This one's 22, the one before it, 19. So as you can see, as we follow this along, the frames are getting longer and longer in time to execute. Well, if we then move down another level, the longest thing in here is the tick. And this is the culprit. This is the answer to the entire question. The thing that is affecting our performance the most is the ticks. As you can even see, if we were to just look at the project as a whole, if you look here, you can see it's already laid out. And when you look here, this is now for the collection. Obviously, frames. You're gonna get a lot of frames. This is what's making up the game. But when you look for the wait for tasks, we had over almost 2 million wait for tasks. Which then, if you look below, you've got the frames, and the frames that's a lot. But the wait until the task complete is even higher. So this is telling us that there is something that is looping so much that it's impacting performance significantly. At the stage when we were focusing on finding this issue, the biggest culprit for this was the compass and marker system, as well as the objective system on top of that. But before, they were attached to the event tick, which then an event tick is something that happens every single tick. Because these were happening every single tick, it wasn't fully getting through to it before it was then doing another one and then another one and another one. And they were just stacking so much on top of each other that it was just bringing performance down. There are several workarounds for this. The version that I did isn't necessarily the best way to do it. What we have in the event graph is the begin play, which does our casting, gets this. and then it starts a custom event called chosen method. Here's chosen method, and it's just a branch of all these different strings to know what the chosen method is. It then goes to a function which has all the it breaks down the objective further, but then it has a slight delay, and then it does chosen method again, causing it to loop around. I've essentially created my own event tick, but something that only happens every half a second, because now it's not happening every single frame, it's now happening just once every half a second. So this was probably a later work, one where we'd made these improvements. As you can see, there are still clear red spikes here, but to break this down, this will have been on the main menu. This will then have been opening up the day map, and then this will be following through the day map to then here again, where we switch to the night map, and then we continue on here. And as you can clearly see, we are getting some high, well, I say high, some high peaks, but this is still saying 144 frames, brilliant. This is getting even further of 200 frames, which is great, really good. There are a couple, drop in frames, but we're consistently keeping these peaks. This could very well be a UI element that we're creating and then going back to the game. But as you can clearly see, removing the ticks from this, like if we were to hop to a 203 frame per second here, and we were to look at the frame, it's running at 4.9 milliseconds. That's really good. We hop to one a little bit more, 7.9, fitting into that average we saw before. If we look at one of these ones here, the frame was taking a bit longer, but like I say, this was probably when it was opening the level and loading everything in, bringing all the textures in. So if you are running into issues with frame rate, do check used particles are brought to being used by the GPU rather than the CPU, because using the CPU will sort of lock your frame rate quite low down. Looking at the frames is a more significant place to look first,